The movie starts with a man stopping his truck by the roadside to do some work. Suddenly, a woman with a gun approaches him, scaring him off, stealing his truck, and driving away in a panic. The movie then shifts to the past, where we see the same woman, Megan, with her husband, Scott. They are packing their belongings and heading somewhere. As they stop at a store to buy some supplies, a news report reveals that Megan had been kidnapped and declared dead by the police after an extensive search. However, she has now returned on her own. Megan and Scott leave the store and continue their journey, heading to Scott's ancestral property, bought by his grandfather in his 20s. While on the road, Megan sees an elderly woman. Upon reaching the house, she keeps seeing the woman clearly. At night, we learn from Scott that his grandmother bought this house near her own because she disliked children and used to leave all the children from her family in this house during family gatherings. Later that night, a glass breaks in Megan's hand, causing her to panic. Scott calms her down, and after cleaning the glass, they go to bed. However, Megan wakes up in the middle of the night and starts wandering around the house. She hears strange noises and initially dismisses them as her imagination. But then she hears a dog barking and a plate shattering, making her extremely scared. To make matters worse, Scott sleepwalks into the room. The next morning, Megan tells Scott about his sleepwalking, and he confirms it, but denies hearing a dog barking as there was no one around. Megan ultimately agrees and thinks it must have been her imagination. While reading a book, she hears the dog barking again. She goes outside to investigate and finds a broken-down motorcycle in the garage. She returns to the house. As Megan is telling Scott about these events, he too hears the dog barking. When he goes outside, he finds it's his cousin Madeline's dog, who is staying at his grandfather's house with his mother for the holidays. Scott is happy to see his cousin, and they start reminiscing about past incidents. Later that night, Megan has nightmares again. Scott takes her outside to play tennis with Madeline. While playing, Megan finds Madeline's touch unpleasant. She also notices that Madeline and Scott are very close, which makes her even more uncomfortable. While worrying about this, she panics in the house again, but Scott calms her down. He gives her wine, but Madeline arrives for dinner. When Madeline touches Scott's hand, Megan becomes uncomfortable again. After Madeline leaves, Megan talks to Scott about it. Scott tells her that she is overthinking and shouldn't worry so much, but Megan doesn't listen and goes to bed. She again has bad dreams and wakes up. However, she ignores it this time. The next day, we see Megan at a nearby beach. There she meets a boy named Joe who is fishing. He tells her to leave as it's a private party organized by Scott's family. Megan tells him she is Scott's wife. Joe apologizes and tells her that he only found out about Megan's kidnapping recently because of Scott. He also mentions he had been at the beach last year, which makes Megan think. While Scott and Megan are spending quality time together at night, she hears strange noises again and feels like she's being watched. Scott tries to reassure her, and her days continue in a similar fashion. She wanders into a nearby jungle and sees a strange woman. Megan can't figure out who she is. Later, she visits Madeline's house, where Madeline shows her a family photo taken by her mother. The photo includes Madeline's brother, who died at the age of 5 by drowning in the sea. Megan also learns from Madeline that her mother still lives with her in the house, but she is slowly fading away. This makes Megan think that she saw Madeline's mother in the jungle. Madeline tells her that her mother hasn't left her room for months. Megan wants to meet her, but Madeline forbids it. This makes Megan feel strange, and she leaves for her own house. At night, we see Madeline visiting Megan's house for dinner again. However, Megan is very uncomfortable with Madeline's presence. She feels negative vibes from her and doesn't like her constantly talking to Scott. She asks Madeline to stop talking so much, and Madeline starts making fun of her. She taunts Megan about not eating properly from her plate. Scott calms Madeline down and explains that Megan doesn't eat in front of others because of her past trauma. But Megan doesn't like this because she doesn't want Madeline or anyone else to feel superior to her. She quickly eats her food in front of Madeline. Scott tries to calm her down, but Megan ignores him and goes to her room upset. It's clear that Madeline is making fun of her because she is Scott's wife and is also feeling too comfortable with him. After Madeline leaves for the night, Scott comes to their room. As they talk, we learn that when Megan was kidnapped, a video of her was sent to Scott along with demands for money. Megan now wants to know from Scott what he did after that. He doesn't want to talk about it because he doesn't want to bring those memories back to Megan's mind. But Megan is annoyed by this and silently goes to sleep. At night, we notice that she still has strange dreams. The next morning, we see Megan going to the garage where the broken motorcycle is. Using her engineering skills, she is an engineer, she fixes it. After fixing the bike, she takes it to town. She drives to a bar where she meets Joe again. She starts talking to him and asks him about Madeline. She feels like Scott might be having an affair with her, and that's why Madeline is at the same place at the same time as Scott. Joe tells her that Madeline is around often, but he doesn't pay much attention to her because he doesn't like Scott's family. We also notice that Joe is becoming attracted to Megan. They start dancing together, and when Megan tries to leave at night, Joe tries to stop her. Megan doesn't want to stay with him and refuses, but when he forces her, she feels very strange. She attacks Joe, takes her bike, and runs away. Upon reaching her house, Megan feels even more uneasy. She is slowly becoming suspicious of Scott, feeling like he brought her here intentionally so he could kidnap her again. She panics and locks herself in her room. Scott tries to reason with her, but Megan ignores him. She just wants to leave this place and go back to where they lived before. Scott agrees, and when Megan opens the door the next morning, he tries to convince her that she might be overthinking. She calms down but still wants to leave. Scott agrees, but when they look at their car, they realize a tire is punctured and there's no one around to fix it. So Scott convinces Megan to stay for another night. She agrees, but she doesn't feel comfortable. At night, Megan starts feeling strange again. She has more bad thoughts, and to make matters worse, Madeline arrives and starts playing table tennis with Scott. She is very comfortable with him, which Megan doesn't like at all. Madeline asks Megan and Scott to join her at the beach, suggesting they go swimming later. Megan refuses, and Madeline and Scott leave for the beach. Megan is left alone at the house, which she doesn't want. If she suspected something, she should have gone with Scott, but obviously she is suspicious and feels uncomfortable there. She goes to the beach and sees Madeline and Scott enjoying themselves and even kissing. Megan doesn't like this. She takes her bike and leaves in anger, wanting to leave the place alone. On her way, she sees the elderly woman again in the jungle, and Madeline's dog comes in front of her bike. The accident makes Megan unconscious. The next morning, when she wakes up, she goes to the house and sees Madeline and Scott together again. This enrages her. She confronts Scott, berates him, and chases Madeline away. Scott tries to calm her down and convince her that nothing is as she thinks. He suggests maybe she's hallucinating. He advises her to write down everything she feels in a diary to calm her mind and get all these things out of her head. Megan agrees and starts writing in a diary. Later that night, we see Megan sleeping with the diary. However, the next morning, when she wakes up, she can't find her diary. She starts searching for it but can't find it anywhere. She goes outside looking for it and sees Madeline looking for her dog. Seeing this as an opportunity, she goes to Madeline's house. First, she goes to the room where Madeline keeps her mother, but there's no one there. This makes Megan feel strange, but she finds her diary on the desk there along with some of her reports. This makes Megan even more suspicious of Madeline and Scott. When Madeline arrives, Megan takes her to the spot where Megan had an accident with her dog. When Madeline sees her dog's accident, she starts crying. Megan seizes this opportunity and attacks her. When Madeline regains consciousness, she finds herself tied to a pole. Megan is sitting in front of her holding a gun. We learn from Megan's words that she feels Madeline and Scott are trying to kidnap her again. She feels that they orchestrated the whole situation to be together. She thinks they're having an affair. Madeline tries to explain to her, but Megan doesn't understand. At that moment, Scott arrives and sees Megan doing this. He tries to convince her that nothing is as she thinks, but Megan doesn't listen. She points the gun at Scott and runs away. After running a short distance, Scott catches up with her. He tries to reason with her and grab the gun, but at that moment, Megan fires the gun, accidentally killing Scott. Megan doesn't care about any of this now and runs away with the gun to the road. She sees a truck driver and points the gun at him, taking his truck and driving away. This is the same scene we saw at the beginning of the movie. Megan's problem here is that she developed schizophrenia after the kidnapping. The reports that she found were actually Madeline's, not hers. Both of them were trying to comfort her, to reason with her. However, due to her schizophrenia, she sees everything upside down. She sees what she thinks and she believes what she wants to believe. This leads her to suspect everyone, her husband, her cousin, and even herself, of trying to kidnap her and kill her. What about Madeline lying about her mother? Obviously, because of her mental state, Megan was very sensitive. Madeline didn't want to tell her the truth that she has schizophrenia and needs treatment. They took her diary so they could understand what was going on in her mind. I think they were also in contact with her doctor. The doctor might have suggested taking Megan out to give her a change. But Megan was in the last stage of schizophrenia, which made her capable of anything. Another interesting detail I noticed is that Madeline, I think, isn't Scott's cousin but Megan's doctor. Yes, there were reports about Megan on her desk. She was checking her diary to see what she was thinking. I think they were intentionally doing things in front of her to trigger her and make her come back to reality, but she misinterpreted everything. The treatment for her became dangerous for the doctor and her husband. This could also be the reason why the doctor's mother wasn't in her room. Boom. The movie ends there. You see people in advanced stages of schizophrenia clearly feel like there's someone around them who's trying to kill them or that everyone is plotting against them. In fact, I saw a YouTube video of a woman with schizophrenia in which she's having a conversation with no one around her. She's scared, which can be very terrifying. The same thing happened with Megan. Her husband took her out to make her better, but because of her trauma, she started thinking differently. This is why Madeline, her doctor, tried to kill her. So friends, that was the story of Quiet Place. I hope you enjoyed this psychological horror movie. This movie deals completely with drama and schizophrenia. As I mentioned, social horror type films are very trendy these days. If you enjoy the video, give it a like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. I'll see you all in the next video.